Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we're going to be taking a look at Starship construction rules for Mongoose Traveller 2nd Edition. Last year I wrapped up my 10-part how-to/review series, which was primarily covering the main Traveller Corebook, and I mentioned that I plan to go over shipbuilding rules eventually. Well, today is that day. Now, at the time that I made that video, ship construction rules were only available in the High Guard book. However, since then, Mongoose has updated the core rulebook to the 2022 edition. Now, it's still the same rules edition of the game. It's still Mongoose 2nd Edition. Everyone freaked out thinking this was a totally new rules edition, like it was, Traveller 3rd Edition, but it's not. However, the 2022 updated version includes several items and rules that weren't previously included in the main core book. They were all rules that the game had, but those were rules that were off in other books, one of which being shipbuilding rules. Now, the new core book shipbuilding rules are pretty basic when you compare them to those found in High Guard. It doesn't have all the options, like building ships out of hollowed out asteroids, capital ships with giant spinal mounted weapons. Basically, the full ship construction rules that you can find in High Guard is 50 pages long, while the core book is simply the basic rules at 12 pages long, allowing us to make most of the sample ships that are provided in the core book. Ship creation rules aren't just for building ships, but also for modifying ships. Very often travelers are going to acquire some sort of starship, and they're going to want to make some changes or upgrades to it, adding armor, weapon turrets, beefing up the engines, swapping out a stateroom for a medical bay or a science lab or maybe a luxury stateroom, adding secret compartments, adding holographic controls, or a whole slew of other cool options. And the updated core rulebook covers every single one of those, so that's what we're going to use for the purpose of this video. Now, there's a few things that we're going to need to do this. First is a ship roster sheet. You can download this from the Mongoose website. This is what we use to build the ship. Later, once it's built, we'll then want a ship record sheet, which is something new that the 2022 update has added. This is kind of like your character sheet for your ship, which is places where you can track critical hits, weapon ranges, and damage. You can also download this for free from the website as well. I'll stick links below for both of those. Constructing a ship requires a shipyard, and the ship is limited to the tech level of the shipyard that's building it. So if you want a tech level 14 ship, you need to go to a tech level 14 or higher shipyard in order to do it. Now, if the travelers are maybe trying to attach some sort of cool technology that they stole or salvaged on one of their adventures, then it's going to be the game master's call if the shipyard of a lower tech level can do that and how much that's going to cost for them to do it. For the purpose of this video, we're only going to look at new ship construction. Construction times can vary depending on the facility, but on average it takes 1 day per million credits of the ship. So a 50 mega credit starship is going to take 50 days to construct. For this example video, I've decided that I'm going to build an existing type of ship, the classic 100-ton Type S scout ship, a traveler favorite for over 40 years. I like it because it's not only small, 100 displacement tons is the smallest a jump-capable ship can be, but being 100 tons makes the math a lot easier. A lot of ship construction is based off of percentages, and 1% of 100 tons equals 1 ton, or 5% equals 5 tons, so that's going to make this some pretty easy math. Spacecraft construction is broken into 13 steps, so we'll be going through these one at a time. This is going to have a lot of math, so I'll try to break the steps out as simply as I can, showing my work as I go so you can follow along. So, taking our blank ship roster sheet, first thing we'll do is fill in ship type as Scout Courier Type S. Most of this process will be focusing on this box on the left side, so let's zoom in to give you a better view. For TL, which is tech level, we'll put tech level 12. Now what this means is, like with your shipyard building it, the tech level of the ship sets the ceiling of the tech we can install on it, so we can't put something like tech level 15 reactors on our tech level 12 starship. Once that's done, we're ready to begin, starting with step 1, creating the hull. The ship's hull is the ship's body or fuselage, and size is measured in displacement tons of hydrogen. So it's not weight, but volume that the tonnage measures. The size of the ship dictates what all that ship is capable of, such as what it can carry. The minimum size to be jump capable is 100 tons, which is the size that we'll be doing today. So let's fill that in. On the left column, we'll put hull, and in the description, we'll put 100 tons. Now, a basic hull costs 50,000 credits per ton, and every 2.5 tons gives us 1 hull point, which are our ship's hit points. Okay, so going back to our sheet, 100 tons of ship multiplied by 50,000 comes to 5 million credits, or 5 mega credits, which is denoted as MCR. and we'll put that in the column under cost. Now onto hull points. Zooming back out on the sheet, hull points are listed at the bottom, so 100 tons of ship divided by 2.5 gives us 40 hull points, and we'll fill that in at the bottom here. However, this is only the basic hull. We still have to decide what our hull's configuration is. Now, the Highguard book gives us 7 different configuration options to choose from. The 2022 Corebook only gives us the 3 most common ones, so just to kind of show you the difference between the full Highguard version and the shortened version in the main Corebook. So we'll need to choose what general shape our ship is. We have streamlined, standard structure, and dispersed structure. Each has its own features. We're going to go with streamlined, meaning our ship can enter atmosphere with no problems, whether that be landing on a planet or skimming a gas giant. However, if you notice, streamlining a ship increases that hull's cost by 20%. So going back to our sheet, add streamline to the hull notes, and taking our cost of 5 mega credits, we increase it by 20%, so that comes to 6 mega credits for a streamlined hull, so update the sheet from 5 to 6. And finally, we have this column denoting tons. Now, this is where we list the tonnage used for every piece of the ship. However, the hull doesn't occupy tonnage. The ship's hull is the tonnage, so with this field, we'll just mark it as blank here. There we go. Now, the tech level and the hull are set factors. We can never upgrade or modify these once they're built, so this is always going to be a 100-ton streamlined ship. Everything after this point can be modified or upgraded in-game if your travelers have a ship and they want to add or change anything at a shipyard. Next, let's install some armor on this hull. Ships begin with 0 armor. Now they still do offer protection. Starting at tech level 9, ship's hulls are self-sealing against minor breaches such as micrometeor strikes or just regular damage hits, so we don't have to worry about explosive decompression from basic damage. However, dispersed structured ships cannot receive additional armor. Now this doesn't affect our ship because ours is going to be streamlined, so let's go ahead and beef it up a bit and add some armor. The Corebook gives us 2 types of armor: crystal iron and bonded superdense. However, notice that the bonded superdense begins at tech level 14. Our ship is only tech level 12, so we can't get that. So instead, we're going to get crystal iron armor. Now this is all done per point of armor. So each point costs 1.25% of our hull's tonnage and costs 5% of our hull's cost. And the maximum armor that we can have is either our ship's tech level or 13, whichever is less. So being that our ship is tech level 12, the most crystal iron armor that we could get is 12 points. However, let's just give our ship 4 points of armor, so get your calculators ready. Starting with the tonnage consumed, 1.25% of our 100-ton ship comes to 1.25 tons per armor point. So 1.25 multiplied by 4 points of armor means that armoring our ship will consume 5 tons of space. Next, let's see what this will cost us. Each point of armor costs 5% of our hull's cost. We already calculated out that our hull costs 6 million credits, so 5% of that is 0.3 mega credits per armor point. Multiply that by 4, and we can see that it'll cost us 1.2 million credits to armor our ship. So now let's plug that into our sheet. We'll add an armor category, and then list the type as crystal iron, and 4 points of that. It consumes 5 tons and costs 1.2 mega credits. And that's our completed hull. Now to begin filling it with stuff, which brings us to step 2, installing our drives. The first drive we'll install is our basic thrusters or engines, and these could be reaction drives like old-fashioned fuel-guzzling rockets, or maneuver drives which use gravity fields to push the ship around. M drives cost 2 mega credits per ton. So checking this chart here, again we're limited by the tech level of the shipyard and by our own ship's tech level, so we can't use any that are above tech level 12, which rules out these 2 at the end here. We'll choose thrust 2 engines. Those begin at tech level 10, well within our allowed tech level, and consume 2% of our hull's tonnage. So let's calculate their tonnage. 2% of our 100-ton ship comes to 2 tons consumed. Their cost, which we already established, is 2 mega credits a ton, so 2 tons multiplied by 2 mega credits gives us a total cost of 4 mega credits. So there you go. Thrust 2 M drives consume 2 tons and cost 4 million credits. So going back to our ship sheet, let's fill that in. We have our M drive. It provides thrust 2, consumes 2 tons, and costs us 4 mega credits. Now to install the jump drives. J drives are how we jump our ship long distances. The drive rating is the maximum number of parsecs we can move in a single jump. When we calculate the tonnage for these, we then add 5 to that amount, and the minimum that we can have is 10 tons total. So keep that in mind, and J drives cost us 1.5 mega credits per ton of the drive. So looking at this chart here, again with a tech level, because our ship is tech level 12, we can't install these 3 types of J drive. We'll go with Jump 2 rated drives. Those begin at tech level 11 and consume 5% of our ship's tonnage. Calculating our tonnage consumed, 5% of our 100-ton ship comes to 5 tons. But remember, once we've calculated it from this chart, we then add 5 tons to it. So adding 5 gives us a total of 10 tons that our jump drives consume. Now to calculate how much this is going to cost us. Again, J drives cost $1.5 million per ton, so 10 tons at 1.5 MCR a ton comes to 15 megacredits. So now that we know that, let's give our scout ship Jump 2 engines. It consumes 10 tons of space and costs us 15 million credits. Time to put that on our ship sheet. Our category is jump drive. We have Jump 2 drives. They consume 10 tons and they cost us a whopping 15 million credits. Now that is it for engines. Now on to step 3, installing our power plant. The power plant, usually a fusion reactor, provides power to everything on the ship. Life support, the ship's drives, the coffee maker, laser cannons, everything. So before purchasing our power plant, the first thing we have to do is calculate how much power we actually require. So pulling up our full ship page, power requirements are listed here. The 3 main areas that require power are basic systems, such as lights, artificial gravity, and life support, the maneuver drive, and the jump drive. So going through these one at a time, basic ship systems require power equal to 20% of the ship's total tonnage. So 20% of our 100-ton ship, that gives us to 20, so let's fill that in our sheet. Next is our M drive. Power requirement is 10% of the ship's tonnage multiplied by the ship's maximum thrust. So, 10% of our 100-ton ship, that comes to 10. So we take 10, multiply that by our maximum thrust of 2, and that comes to a power requirement of 20. So let's fill that in on our sheet under power requirements, maneuver drive. And then we have our jump drive. Power required is 10% of a ship's total tonnage, so in our case 10, then multiplied by the maximum jump distance that our ship is capable of. Well, since we're a Jump 2 ship, that means I multiply it by 2, and that gives us a power requirement of 20. So let's fill that in our sheet. Totaling that up, we have a power requirement of 60. Now that we know how much power we need, let's look into purchasing a power plant for it. We get 3 types of reactors. One of them is tech level 15, so we can't use that. We're only tech level 12, so we'll choose the tech level 12 reactor for our ship. We can see that it provides 15 points of power per ton, and that these reactors cost 1 megacredit per ton of reactor purchased. So we already know that we need 60 points of power, so at 15 points per ton, it would require a 4-ton reactor to give us 60 points of power. Now remember that 60 is our minimum requirement. We're still going to need some additional power for things like sensors and weapons or various add-ons like low bursts. So if I were making the ship for myself, I'd buy 5 tons of reactor, giving us 75 power points. A nice little surplus to have just in case something goes wrong. And that way we can fully run all the systems at the same time without having to shut off or divert power in order to make a jump or anything like that. Unfortunately, this ship is made by the Scout Services, which is a government branch, and being run by the government means it's at the mercy of bean counters who fail to see the wisdom of beefing up the power plant. So, our Scout ship only has 4 tons of reactors. At 1 megacredit a ton, 4 tons consumes 4 megacredits in cost, so let's fill that in on our roster sheet. Zooming in, we fill in the category field as power plant. The description is fusion reactor, the tech level 12 variety. Total power output is 60, and the reactors occupy 4 tons of space, and the cost of that is 4 million credits. Alrighty, that is it for step 3. We have our drives in order to move our ship and our reactors to power them, but we still need fuel to run those reactors, which brings us to step 4, installing fuel tanks. Fuel is required for 2 ship systems. First is the jump drive, which consumes massive quantities of fuel, and the second is the power plant. While fuel tanks certainly occupy some of our ship's tonnage, they don't cost us anything to install. Evidently, the cost of whatever hoses and fuel pumps are required was simply included in the price of the J drive and the power plant. Calculating this up, we can see that the fuel required for jump drives is 10% of the ship's total tonnage multiplied by the drive's maximum jump rating. For us, 10% of our 100-ton ship comes to 10 tons. We then multiply that by our Jump 2 rating, and that comes to 20 tons that our ship requires in order to make a Jump 2 or a pair of 1 parsec jumps. For power plants, we require 10% of our power plant's tonnage, rounding up to a minimum of 1. That gives us enough fuel to run all the systems on the ship for 4 weeks' time. Our power plant, as we've already determined at step 3, is 4 tons, so 10% of that comes to 0.4 tons, but we still have to round that up to 1 ton. Furthermore, if we increase this tonnage, we can increase our operational time, and Scout Services requires 12 weeks of operation time. So at 1 ton for every 4 weeks, it requires 3 tons of fuel for a 12-week operation. Personally, I think the bean counters behind Scout Services just like the fact they can increase the fuel tank size and operation time for free because free is their favorite price. Regardless, totaling it up comes to 23 tons allotted for fuel tanks. So pulling up our ship sheet back up, we fill in fuel tanks. Then in the description, we note that we have enough fuel for both a Jump 2 as well as 12 weeks of operation before we need a refill. Tonnage we list is 23, and the cost is nothing. Now that does it for fuel tanks, but before we go on, I want to make another note here on our roster sheet. So zooming back out to the full sheet, at the bottom here in this little note section, I'm going to make a note that Jump 1 consumes 10 tons and Jump 2 consumes 20 tons of fuel. You don't need to do this when you're doing your sheet, but I find it really helps avoid confusion later on when you're playing to simply note just what the jump fuel costs are on it somewhere. That way you don't have to go back and try to remember. Okay, so that is it for the math-intensive portion of ship construction. There's still some math remaining, but for those who are like me or just terrible at math, the worst part of that is over, and the rest of this is going to go a whole lot easier. So on that happy note, let's get to step 5, installing the bridge. All ships require a bridge. It's where we pilot the ship, we work the comms, the sensors, and all the best drama in our favorite sci-fi shows happens. For small craft of 50 tons or less, we'd install a cockpit, maybe a double cockpit if we wanted to get fancy with that, but for larger ships it requires a full bridge, and for that we get this chart. So going by this, our 100-ton scout ship requires 6 tons of space dedicated to bridge. However, for some reason, the Type S allotted 10 tons to their bridge, making it almost twice the size, and I don't know why they did that.
You don't know? Well, allow me to enlighten you. This is the deck plan for the Type S. Here's the bridge right here. You see this? This is an office. So Scout Services and their infinite wisdom who said we ain't got room to give you another ton of reactor space or even a galley so your crew can relax for a bit, they still somehow found room to give our captain his own private office. And if you're thinking to yourself, no way, Jack, that can't possibly be an office. You gotta be reading that deck plan wrong. Then check out this deck plan for the Type S that appears in High God, and it is clearly labeled as being an office. That's the very first label that they put on it because that's their number one priority, proving once again that offices are the only ones that get taken care of in this freaking outfit.
You might be onto something there. The cost of the bridge is half a mega credit for every 100 tons of the ship that bridge is installed on. So this being a 100-ton scout ship, it's going to cost the same whether it's a 6-ton bridge or a 10-ton bridge.
Yeah, you betcha. Those pencil pushers back at the home office, they had to be high-fiving themselves over that one. Oh, Captain, here's a private office. We didn't spend a single credit for giving that to you. We're sure that your crew couldn't possibly use that space for anything remotely more useful than that. Cheap chicks.
Anyway, so taking these numbers, let's go ahead and plug them into our sheet here. So at our bridge, it occupies 10 tons. No mention of the office because that makes Jack upset, and it costs us 500,000 credits. Now that's it for step 5. Now on to step 6, installing our ship's computer and software. The ship's computer is the brain of the ship, and it works just like a personal computer in Traveller works, only it's far more powerful. So it still has a processing rating and can run software programs as long as their combined bandwidth doesn't exceed the computer's processing score. Ship's computers take up no tonnage. They're considered to be distributed throughout the ship. Part of them is in the bridge, part of it's in the power plants, the drives, the staterooms, and everywhere else, which is great. I love stuff that doesn't consume any of our limited tonnage space. Now, very importantly, for jump-capable ships like ours, the computer must be capable of running jump control software of the appropriate jump rating. So for us, having a Jump 2 capable ship, our computer must possess and be able to run at least Jump 2 software. Otherwise, all our fancy and expensive jump drives are completely useless. So because of that, when you're purchasing your ship's computer, I recommend that you first look at the software to see what the minimum processing score for your computer needs to be. So here we have jump control software rated jump 1 through 6. Jump Control 2 is the minimum level that we'll require to operate our ship's Jump 2 drives, and we can see that it's bandwidth 10, which means whatever computer we get must be at least able to handle that much. It's like buying a console because you want to play a specific video game. It does you no good if you buy a PS4 when you're wanting to play a PS5 game. With that in mind, let's look at computers. This second one here looks like the one that we want. We can see that it has a processing rating of 10, which is the minimum we need to run Jump Control 2. However, one feature that we can add to our computers is jump control specialization. Now, how that works is any computer that you upgrade with it receives a +5 processing score when dealing with jump control programs. So we could take this crappy computer 5 and by adding jump control specialization to it would bring its processing power up to 10 for only jump control software while still being processing speed 5 for everything else. But who in their right mind would install a weak-ass computer on a souped-up jump drive card onto a 40 million credit starship when you could just buy a better computer in the first place?
Really? You actually have to ask that? Because I'll tell you who it was. It was those pencil pushers behind Scout Freaking Services that did that to us. Oh yeah, they could have spent just a little bit more and gotten us a half-decent computer, but all of a sudden they just didn't have the money or the budget for that one, so now I'm flying around on deployment with the freaking 286. I can't even play half the newest video games on that thing. Seriously, anyone who has ever worked a government job can tell you that the Type S Scout ship is the most accurate depiction of cost-cutting, real-life RIMF weirdness ever captured in a tabletop role-playing game.
Regardless of the reasons, the Scout ship uses a Computer 5 with Jump Control Specialization add-on, so that's what we're going to use for this. The computer itself is 30,000 credits. The jump specialization increases that by 50%, so totaling that up comes to 45,000 credits, or 0.045 megacredits. So pulling back up our ship roster sheet, we add a computer section. Under description, we note that it has a 5 processor, but it's been upgraded with a jump control specialization, denoted with this little /biz. Weight is 0 tons, and the cost is 0.045 megacredits. So that is it for ship's computer. Now let's add some software programs to it. Now normally, if I were making the ship for myself, I would list software here, directly under computer. However, for the purpose of this video, because I am recreating an existing ship and it makes it easier for viewers to compare it to the ship that's in the book if everything lines up, I'm going to place software here. It doesn't really make any difference, where you put it, but I wanted to explain why I'm going to be jumping down this far on the roster sheet. So going back to our software list, which this isn't listed in the ship construction portion of the book, by the way, the list appears in the spacecraft operations portion. The first program they're going to want is that Jump Control 2. After all, we just went through all the steps just so we can even run it. Tech level required is tech level 11. Now real fast, our computer, even though it's weak, because it's installed in a tech level 12 ship, is considered to be a tech level 12 computer, and it can run up to tech level 12 software. Everything that's installed on the ship at the time that it's built is built at the tech level of that ship, even if that component is available at a lower tech level. So our computer, which started becoming available at tech level 7, is still a tech level 12 computer. And that's just something to keep in mind if you ever have players try to hack a ship's computer or anything. We go by the ship's tech level that we do in order to run anything. Anyway, back to software. We can see that Jump Control 2 requires 10 bandwidth and costs 0.2 megacredits. So going back to our sheet, we're going to fill that in. Jump Control 2, 10 bandwidth, costs no tonnage, and costs 0.2 megacredits, far more than that cheap computer that we're going to be running it on. Next, we're going to pick up these 3 programs. Maneuver is the basic software that we need in order to fly the ship around. Intellect is the basic software that allows us to give verbal commands, sort of like a beefed up Siri. Now, this isn't a full conscious AI intellect. Those are available in HighGuard, but they are a much higher tech level and are super expensive. In the previous Traveller Corebook, intellect software required 10 bandwidth and was pretty expensive add-on. So for any of you that are using the previous Corebook or HighGuard, that has now changed. So in the 2022 update, Intellect software is now 0 bandwidth and standard on all ships of tech level 11 or higher. Finally is the ship's library, which is a huge database of information and news that's regularly updated whenever we go to a starport. These 3 programs use 0 bandwidth and are all included for free on your ship's computer. Some people don't even write these down on their sheet because they're all standard, but we're going to go ahead and add them to our roster sheet. And with those noted, we've now finished up Step 6 and we're on to Step 7, installing our ship sensors. Sensors represent both the ship's ability to read its surroundings and communicate. There are several varieties that we can have. Basic sensors come standard on every starship. Those are free, consume no tonnage, and no power, which is awesome. However, basic sensors also impose a DM-4 to all sensors and comm checks, which is a huge penalty. No traveler wants those. So for our ship, we're going to install military-grade sensors. These don't incur any DM penalty or bonus, meaning that they're not bad, but they're also not that great. Those cost 4.1 million credits, consume 2 tons of space, and also consume 2 points of power. So remembering all that, let's fill that in on our ship sheet. Starting it off with our stat box, we add sensors. For description, we'll put in military grade. I also like to note the sensor dice modifier here, just so we always know what that is. So I'm going to add a DM plus 0, just to remind us that we don't have any dice modifier when it comes to using these particular sensors. Next, it occupies 2 tons of space and costs us 4.1 mega credits. Moving our attention from the stat box down to the power requirements, notice that there's a field called sensors. So we'll note here that our sensors consume 2 power. Because our power plant can only produce 60 power, that means that we're not going to be able to run all the systems at the same time, and our engineer might need to be diverting power whenever we activate our jump drive. And with that, we're finished with Step 7. Now on to Step 8, installing weapons. Now we covered part of this in our previous space combat video, but let's dive into ship weapons. Only so many weapons can be mounted to a ship. The biggest factor is the size of the ship. Weapons are mounted on what's called hard points, and a spacecraft has 1 hard point for every tons that it is, so our 100-ton scout ship has 1 hard point. A 400-ton close escort ship has 4 hard points. Each weapon system, whether it be a fixed mount, turret, or barbette, occupies a single hard point. Now in High Guard, once we get to the massive ship weapon bays and spinal mounts, that's going to change, but for everything that's in the 2022 Corebook, each weapon mount only occupies 1 hard point. Now, fixed mounts can hold up to 3 weapons each, and turrets, depending on the size of that turret, can hold up to 3. Now, these weapons don't have to be identical to one another, so we can have a turret that's got a missile launcher, a beam laser, and a sandcaster if it's a triple turret, or maybe we could just put 3 beam lasers on it. Barbettes, which are huge, heavy turrets, occupy more tonnage and are only single-mount weapons. The older version of the Corebook didn't offer barbettes at all. Those previously only appeared in High Guard, but the 2022 Corebook offers us particle barbettes now. For small craft, meaning ships that are under 100 tons, we instead use what's called firm points. A craft under 35 tons has 1 firm point, 35 to 70 tons has 2, and 71 to 99 tons has 3 firm points. Firm point weapons work like normal, but they have a few changes. Weapons of medium range or less are reduced to only adjacent range, and weapons with greater ranges are reduced to close range. Firm point weapons may not have their range increased beyond close range by any means. Finally, while hardpoint mounts might occupy single, double, or triple mounted weapons, firm point weapons, while they may be fixed or turrets, can only be single mount, and they can't hold barbettes. So this tiny 10-ton fighter has but a single firm point fixed mount, and this 20-ton gig has a firm point mounted single turret. Now, one thing that I asked when I learned all this is the obvious question. Can I choose to replace a hardpoint mount with 3 firm point mounts? So let's say I've got a 200-ton ship, and instead of having 2 hardpoint weapons, I could mount 1 hardpoint weapon and 3 firm point weapons. Or let's say my ship is 150 tons, because I have 1 hardpoint weapon and 2 firm point weapons in addition to that. And the answer is maybe? I don't know. I don't see why not. Obvious limitations of firm point mounted weapons aside, I'm not familiar with any Traveller spacecraft that have done that, but I also haven't seen a rule that says that you can't if you don't want to. I mean, if a player wanted to at my table, I'd personally allow that. Anyway, once you've determined how many hard or firm points you have, let's look at what you want to mount to them. For regular weapons, we look at this chart. So for a 100-ton scout ship, we have 1 hard point, so we'll install a double turret that consumes 1 power point, 1 ton of space, and costs us 500,000 credits. So going back to our roster sheet, let's fill that in. Starting with our stats portion, we list weapons and then double turret. That consumes 1 ton and costs 0.5 mega credits. All right, now moving back down to our power requirements, we'll note that 1 power that turret consumes. Now, normally, we then look at what weapons that we wanted to install into our turret here, and then note the cost and the power consumption for those. However, the scout ship doesn't come with weapons installed in its turret, so we're not going to do that. But if we were, we'd then check this table. And here we have all of our information that we need for choosing what we want to drop into those 2 weapon slots that turret has. However, one problem with this table is that it includes the particle barbette here. Barbettes are not normal turret weapons. I mean, they are turrets, yes, but they're also huge turrets. These weapons don't mount inside of other turrets. They're the whole turret itself. Unlike regular turrets where we list the turret's power cost and then we add the power cost to the individual weapons that we install in it, with barbettes, the power cost is for everything. The weapon, this huge heavy turret that it goes on, all of it is included right there. And the reason I bring this up is because the 2022 Corebook lists the particle barbette among the regular turret weapons, and it can easily give the impression to somebody that it's just another turret weapon, like a beam laser, and someone might try to stick 2 or 3 particle barbettes into a regular turret, so it shouldn't have been listed with these. It deserves its own separate table because it's a very different type of weapon than the others are. Anyway, that criticism aside, once you've chosen what weapons that you want to install, list those out on your roster sheet. I also recommend that with multiple weapon mounts, you break out the power cost of the individual weapons because let's say you had 3 turrets and each of those is armed with different weapons. Your power consumption each round in space combat might be different, as you might not be firing all your weapons at once, or some rounds you might be firing a power draining beam laser or your non-power draining sandcaster out of a particular turret. So if you list all the costs out on your sheet, it can help keep it all straight in the middle of a combat as you're taking damage in your power plant and you have to reduce your power, and you might have to negotiate which weapons you can use and which ones not to in a given combat round. Now that's it for ship's weapons. Now on to step 9, installing optional systems. Now this one is my favorite part because it's where you get to add all the cool things to our ship to make it unique. However, this is also where a traveler might get themselves in trouble by adding so much cool stuff that they end up lacking the room for other important stuff later, like cargo space. Now, I'm going to go through all the options. There are a lot of them here. There's even more of them in High Guard, so I'm only going to go into the ones that we are installing on our scout ship. First up is our fuel scoop. These are what we use to gather fuel by skimming gas giants for hydrogen. Now, normally, these would cost us 1 mega credit. However, streamlined ships like ours have fuel scoops automatically built into them, so this isn't going to cost us anything. Awesome. So let's go ahead and add that. We have a fuel scoop. It costs us no extra tonnage or price. Now that we have our scoop, let's add some processors because unprocessed fuel sucks. For each ton of processor we have, we can convert 20 tons of unrefined fuel a day. Because our ship tanks are 23 tons, it would take us more than a day to process a full tank of gas. So I don't think that's a big deal, but Scout Services does think that's a big deal, so we're going to install 2 tons of fuel processors. They cost us 50,000 credits per ton and each consume 1 power while they're operating, so let's fill that in on our sheet. Processors capable of 40 tons a day, consumes 2 power, 2 tons of space, and costs us 0.1 mega credits. Now let's add some drones. Specifically, we're going to add some probe drones so we can survey planets, derelict ships, or maybe use them as communications relays. Each ton of probe drones is 5 drones and costs 1 ton of space and half a mega credit, so let's get 10 probe drones. So that'll take up 2 tons and cost us 1 full mega credit. Now let's get a docking space. It's kind of like a garage inside our ship. And how big the space is depends on the size of whatever it is we intend to park inside of it. So if we're docking a small spacecraft, like a shuttle or a launch, the docking space needs to be at least the size of the spacecraft plus 10%. However, we aren't going to be docking a spacecraft in here. Instead, we're going to be docking a vehicle. For vehicle docking spaces, we refer to the shipping size for that vehicle, so let's check that. And our vehicle is going to be an air raft because flying cars are cool. Checking the vehicle stats, we can see that shipping an air raft consumes 4 tons of space. Also, while we're here and we know that we're going to be buying this air raft, we can go ahead and see that their cost is 250,000 credits, so let's go ahead and note those down here. And going back to our sheet, to calculate the docking space that we need is the size of our vehicle plus 10% rounding up. So we know that our air raft consumes 4 tons of space. Adding 10% to that and then rounding it up comes to 5 tons. The dock costs a quarter mega credit a ton, so we multiply that by 5, and the total comes up to 1.25 mega credits. Plugging that into our roster sheet, we have a docking space that can hold 4 tons of vehicles, consumes 5 tons, and costs us 1.25 million. And now that we have a place to put one, let's go ahead and buy our sweet, sweet air raft. Now that doesn't consume tonnage itself because that was already covered by the docking space, so it does cost a quarter million credits, so we just go ahead and note that down. And the last optional system we'll be adding is a workshop. These are areas where tools and fabricators, like super 3D printers that our travelers can use to repair or create items. For every 6 tons of a workshop space that we install, it'll give 2 travelers a DM plus 2 to any mechanical skill rolls aboard a ship, which is pretty awesome, so we're going to go ahead and get 6 tons. Their cost is 0.15 mega credits a ton, so 6 tons at 0.15 comes to 0.9 mega credits, so let's go ahead and fill that in on our sheet. Workshop, 6 tons, 0.9 mega credits. And that is it for optional systems. So let's begin step 10, determining the crew. There are a lot of positions aboard a spaceship, and some of them require more crew than others. To determine the recommended crew for a ship, you consult this chart. It lists not only positions and necessary skills required, but also the salaries for those positions, which is handy if the travelers might want to hire an NPC pilot or other crew members for their ship. Now that salary is for crew members with a level 1 in that required skill, but if they have a higher skill rank, then that salary should increase by 50% for every skill rank that they have above 1. For our ship, necessary positions are pilot, an astrogator, since we do have a jump drive. We only require a single engineer because the combined total of our drives and power plants is 16 and not the 35 tons needed to warrant a second one. And while we do have a turret and we would normally require a dedicated gunner, because our turret doesn't have any weapons currently installed on it, we don't require a gunner yet because they'd have nothing to do. So, going back to our sheet here, in the upper right you can see our crew section. We'll go ahead and fill in that necessary crew. Pilot, astrogator, engineer. And once we get some guns inside or some missile racks, we can add a gunner at that time. Now, our scout ship is pretty small. It's only 100 tons. And for ships under 1,000 tons, you could operate the whole thing with just 1 or 2 people, providing they possess all the necessary skills to do it. However, they'd also be at a serious disadvantage because they can't do everything at once. I see this a lot like Han and Chewie. They could fly and navigate the Millennium Falcon just fine, just between them, but if someone needed to go and fire the turrets or make repairs to her drives, one of them had to go to the back and do that, so it wasn't always the best situation for them. So now that we know how many crew we need to operate our ship, we just need to find a place to put them, which brings us to step 11, installing staterooms. Staterooms are our crew quarters. Each offers us a bed, a fresher, and a basic kitchen. I imagine that being a little more than a microwave and a mini fridge. Normally we allocate 1 person to a room, but in a pinch we can do double occupancy to the rooms. Now there's also low berths, which are freezer pods, which are great for long journeys where passengers merely sleep through it and they don't bother you with dumb questions or anything. Normally we would add these during this step, but Scout Services said no to having low berths aboard the ship, so we're not going to add any. Because our ship requires a crew of 3 to operate, and eventually we might require a gunner, or maybe need room to give a ride to a farm boy and a crazy space wizard, we'll go ahead and install 4 staterooms. Now each room costs us half a mega credit and consumes 4 tons. So with 4 rooms, that comes to 16 tons of space at the cost of 2 mega credits. Going back to our ship's almost full stat box here, let's add staterooms. We're installing 4 standard size rooms as opposed to luxury or high state rooms. That'll consume 16 tons and cost us 2 million credits. Normally at this time, we'd also install some living space aboard this ship, such as a galley or a rec room or some common area where our crew could relax and hang out when they're not on duty. They promote morale and offer some crew and passengers just a little bit of comfort during their long and lonely journeys. It's recommended that we reserve about a quarter of the space that we used for staterooms to be used as common areas, which for us means that we'd have a 4-ton common area, and they're pretty cheap. They're 100,000 credits per ton. Unfortunately for us, Scout Services said that we just don't have it in the budget to be spending taxpayer credits on frivolous things like common areas, and after that scandal that was caused by generously providing our scout ship captains with those 4-ton offices, so we don't want to upset our taxpayers anymore by offering our scouts even more unnecessary luxuries to the people that are in our service, so our scout ship is not going to have a galley or lounge. We're not running a resort here, people.
Oh, they have not heard the last from me about this. I'm going to be filing protests with both the Scout Services and with my union representative about this, just as soon as I can get my email to work on this crappy ship's computer.
And while he does that, we're on to step 12, allocating cargo space. This is the easiest step by far. Any unused tonnage on our ship is allocated for cargo space, which represents how big of our hold is on the ship and how much stuff we can carry. It doesn't cost us anything for this, so it's just simply unused space. So going back to our sheet, let's add cargo space. And determine how big our hold is, we simply add up this column to determine how much tonnage we've allotted, so that comes to 88 tons that we've used. Next, we take the total tonnage of our ship, which is 100 tons, subtract to 88, and that leaves us with 12 tons for our cargo. So let's fill that in. We have 12 tons allotted to cargo, that costs us nothing, and there we go. Easy peasy. Now on to the final step, finalizing our design, which is a catch-all term for all the other crap left to do. Pulling up our sheet, we first double-check that we haven't gone over or under our tonnage, so we total this column up, and yes, comes to 100 tons. Awesome. Next, we figure out our cost. For the purchase price, we simply total up the cost column. Totaling that up comes to 41.045 mega credits, or 41,045,000 regular credits. So let's calculate our monthly maintenance cost. To do that, we take our purchase price of 41,045,000. I personally find this step works a lot easier if we break it down into regular credits versus mega credits. We then divide that by 1,000, so that comes to 41,045 credits is our yearly maintenance cost. We then take that, divide it by 12, and that gives us our monthly maintenance cost of 3,420 credits and some loose change that we found in the captain's office chair cushions. We'll fill that in our sheet as what we need to pay every monthly maintenance period. Okay, there we go. The final step is simply calculating our life support costs, and we did this in the previous video about starship operations. So each stateroom costs us 1,000 credits a month to maintain. This cost is, your food, water, and all that stuff. Personally, I think I should specify that it has to be an occupied stateroom. Any unused stateroom could just simply be closed off and not cost us anything. We then add 1,000 credits a month for every person that's living aboard the ship, say for any low berths. Low berth passengers cost us 100 credits every month. Because these numbers we can only determine after our ship is populated with characters and the number of people on a ship might change every month, this is something that travelers will need to determine after they know how many people they're going to be flying with, which means until then we're finished. So this is our completed starship. Now, just for fun, let's compare it to the one in the book, make sure that I got all my numbers right. Okay, good. Yep, looks the same. Tonnage is all good. Prices line up, correct number of crew, both have 40 hull points, power looks right. I noted the weapon spot for turret, but it's not like it even has weapons in the turret, so that's fine. Purchase and maintenance, wait a second here. I calculated my ship costing 41 million. How does the book version have 36.9405? That's a pretty big difference. And the cost of where that number came from, that's the same. That's weird. If ours costs the same, how are they selling it for 4.1 million less than I am? That's exactly 10%. It's like I'm trying to compete with Walmart here. Okay, maybe this is a typo or something that slipped in when they were making the 2022 update. So I'll just compare this to the old Corebook. That one doesn't break down each component's price, but the components and their tonnage all line up. But, that one's even less than the other one. It's 4.2 million under the price of mine. Okay, well, crap. I know, I'll check Highguard. We'll see what that has to say about this. Once again, tech level and equipment are all the same. Only difference in the descriptions is the new one has this free intellect here, which doesn't affect tonnage or cost, and both of those are the exact same. So then, why the hell does it cost 36.7603 mega credits, while mine costs 41.045 mega credits? Why are all these ships a different price from one another, and why is mine the only one where the numbers actually add up right? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I don't know if this was a mistake that I made or if a mistake that Mongoose has made 3 different times in 3 different ways. I have found nothing to explain why these are different. So my answer is that the price in the books is the price of the ship could be found if it was, out on the open market, if you were to purchase it already made, sort of like the actual sale price versus the MSRP. And that's what mine came to because I actually had it built. But, prices may vary depending on where you bought it, kind of like buying a car. However, I personally don't like that excuse. It feels cheap to me. I don't know why even totaling the High Guard and the 2022 ship comes up with different values than the purchase price listed on those same ships. I don't like that it makes it impossible for someone to test their own ship build and be 100% sure they're doing it right if the same ships don't even follow the same math, because the reason that I chose this ship to use is that way people watching it could follow along and make sure all the numbers add up, and this is a spot where it doesn't add up. I find this frustrating and I find it confusing. Anyway, moving on from that, the only thing left to do is to take a blank ship sheet from the Corebook, or you can download one from the Mongoose website and simply transfer over the information. This sheet is much more useful in-game, once the ship has already been constructed. Much of the information here we're going to be able to fill in once the game has started, such as our mortgage, our salaries, and our cargo, but it also lacks a few things like fuel consumption for a jump, so I really wish there was a second page to it. That way we could get all the important information on this and we wouldn't have to refer back and forth between the 2 pages. Overall, despite my complaints about the price consistency, I really do love the Traveller ship construction rules. They get a lot easier after you've done them the first time, and we get a ton of options on how to build and modify and upgrade our starships, while also having to navigate the tyranny of the rocket equation as we're working that balance between having these big engines so we can go really fast, which then requires a more power plant and more fuel for that, and then that takes away from our cargo space. And now if we want more cargo space, we have to negotiate that balance, within the confines of whatever our ship's tonnage is. There's a really cool logic to it all, and once the players have that basic understanding of that balance and what options are available to their ship, they can have a lot of fun tweaking their ship for their game. And game masters, once they get comfortable with all these rules, they can have a lot of fun creating new and interesting ships to throw against their players.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews, RPG philosophy, or maybe the rest of this now 11-part series on how to play Mongoose Traveller, just hit that subscribe button. Or if you'd like to check out some of Seth's own contributions to the Traveller universe, check out Mysteries in Arcturus Station, which is a 2-adventure book, one of them being completely written by Seth, and the other being Seth's update to the classic Murder in Arcturus Station adventure. There's also Death Station, which is Seth's update to the Mark Miller classic by the same name, and that adventure is totally free to download, links below. Till next time, Travelers, you have a great day. I finally got a response dealing with all my complaints to Scout Services. Yeah, they gave me a freaking promotion out of it. Now I'm a ship's captain and I got my own office now. The rest of the crew, they keep bellyaching to me how they'd like to have a galley or some sort of common area like that. But that sounds like a them problem to me. Being in charge is pretty nice.